Hi everyone, good to see you here. In this video, I'm going to explore the topic of the obstacles on the path of yoga. So the video itself is part of a longer conversation, longer talk I was giving as part of the Dharma talk on Thrive community, yoga community online. And if you are interested in things like that we'll be going to explore in this content, please get in touch to let me know and I can send you more information about Thrive. But putting that aside, the video itself will describe the obstacles, the famous obstacles that Patanjali is talking about in relation to yoga practice. And as such, it will perhaps help you to relate to what's going on in your practice, to what's going on in everyone else's practice. So if you enjoyed this conversation, please don't forget to give it a like, to subscribe to the channel, and to perhaps hit the notification button so you will be informed of new videos as they come. I hope you enjoy. Thank you. So the topic for this Dharma talk is the obstacles that are plentiful, lots of obstacles in our yoga path. And the intention behind this talk is to just touch base with everyone, pretty much because we all are same human beings, we all share similar things, and to see how we as individual and how we as a group can help each other to overcome the obstacles which are just part of human nature. And as I was saying a moment ago, I'm not, above obstacles. There are plenty of obstacles in my life. I'm just trying to do my best when I can. And I definitely use the resources that I have through the yoga teaching to help me along. Because, we all need some help. So the talk itself is going to be divided to what the yoga teachings have to say. And obviously, there are other people and other things that can help us. So I've also kind of looked at a few other things, some kind of life coaching and kind of maybe a bit of neuroscience that we can kind of tag into that and see how we can move forwards, because that's the idea. So sadhana is the word we use for spiritual practice. And as such, we become a sadhaka. So a sadhaka, or a spiritual aspirant, who is on the path of yoga performing sadhana. Okay, so sadhana is what we do, and when there are no obstacles, we do it. When there are obstacles, we don't do it. So how can we move forwards? So a long time ago, the Yoga Sutras were composed, about 450 Common Era, so quite a while ago. And there were accumulation or culmination of various thoughts and ideas that were presenting during that time from different kind of aspects of life and spirituality. They were put together by Patanjali, and he kind of put all these things together to help people, and mainly to help people in his time that were on the path of spirituality and spiritual evolution, but also help those who will come later on. And this is where we kind of find the Yoga Sutras, and we see that Yoga Sutras are relevant for us, even though it's been quite a long time since they were written. And Patanjali himself didn't invent these things. As I was saying, he pulled on these teachings from different traditions, from Buddhism to kind of monastic Brahmins, to kind of jungle-dwelling yogis, and Jain ascetics and fakirs probably, and who knows what. He took all these things that were there and he worked out what's the best thing, what does actually work. And he put it together into these sutras, 195 sentences, shlokas, and he compiled them together into something that I personally find still really, really valuable, because it's still really relevant. Because at the bottom line, whether you are a Hindu, a Jain, a Muslim, a Buddhist, a Jew, a Christian, or an atheist, it doesn't really matter. We are all human beings, and we all, to some extent, suffer from the same afflictions, because we have that ability to do so much good, but at the same time, we have that ability to not do nothing at all, or to do so much bad. We are all the same. And therefore, these teachings are still really, really relevant. So, he describes 9 obstacles. So, book 1 of the Yoga Sutra talks about so book 1, Shloka 30. If you have them at hand, you can kind of quickly pull your copy of the Yoga Sutra and find book 1, Shloka 30. And there he talks about the obstacles. But what I'll do, I'm going to kind of go back a little bit, rewind a little bit to kind of put it into context. So last few months, we were talking about Kriya Yoga as a path. And the last thing we talked about was Ishvara Pranidhana, which was a surrender to God, to Ishvara, in a way to achieve a state of yoga. In book 1, he also talks about Ishvara or Ishvara Pranidhana, and he says that Ishvara Pranidhana is a way to get to Samadhi. So I'm going to go back to book 1, Shloka 23, and I'll just read a few to lead us towards Shloka 30. So Shloka 23 goes like that. Or Samadhi is attained by devotion with total dedication to Ishvara, aka Ishvara Pranidhana. Ishvara is the supreme Purusha, unaffected by any affliction, actions, fruits of actions, or by any inner impressions of desires. So that is the supreme God, beyond all kind of the deities, that is beyond any affliction, pure, and by surrender to that purity, which you did say last time that is an aspect of yourself, by surrendering to that aspect within you, which is the kind of the ultimate, the limitless, then you achieve a state of Samadhi, according to Patanjali. In Ishvara is the complete manifestation of the seeds of omniscience. Okay, so unconditioned by time, he is the teacher of even the most ancient teachers. So it kind of describes what Ishvara is and why, therefore, surrendering to him will bring Samadhi. The word expressive of Ishvara is the mystic sound Om. So here he describes Ishvara. So if you think of reality, and as we know, especially with modern science and understanding that we have nowadays, that everything is energetic. Yeah, everything is energy, and energy is a frequency. And as we know, if we know the quote by Nikola Tesla, he said that if you want to understand the secrets of the universe, think in terms of vibration, because everything has a vibration. So the vibration of Ishvara is Om, which is why people chant Om. Not just because it kind of makes you feel calm or sounds mystical, because Om is the frequency of the ultimate, which we call Ishvara. So Patanjali is saying the word expressive of Ishvara is the mystic sound Om. And then he goes to say, to repeat it with reflection upon its meaning is an aid. So we are talking here about reaching a state of Samadhi. So he said, dedicate yourself to Ishvara. And you can do that by chanting Om. And as you chant Om, you can reflect on its meaning, because that will aid you in your absorption of the sound. So you're not just going Om, 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 Om. You go Om. This is now the vibration of limitlessness, and I surrender into this limitlessness, which is an aspect of my true self, and therefore I overcome what I think is my limitation, because in my core I'm limitless. I am Ishvara, and I do that by using Om. And then he goes to say, from this practice of chanting Om, of surrendering to Ishvara, all the obstacles disappear, and simultaneously dawns knowledge of the inner self. So all the obstacles disappear, and the inner self knowledge just kind of rises. So the Yoga Sutra, so far I'm reading, by the way, from the translation by Swami Satchidananda. It's important to understand that the Yoga Sutras are answers to questions that are not actually written in here. So every shloka is an answer to a question which is not actually here. The question itself is found in what's known as the Bhashya. The Bhashya is the original commentary, not by Swami Satchidananda, by Patanjali himself. There has been some kind of dispute whether it was Patanjali, because usually they were saying that the commentary, the original commentary, is by someone called Vyasa, and that maybe it was written hundreds of years later. But just recently, about maybe 2-3 years ago, One of the scholars who was part of the Hatha Yoga project, a scholar called Philip Moss, has to some extent proved that it was actually Patanjali himself that wrote the original commentary. So the commentaries, the Bhashya, written by Patanjali himself, where he was presenting the questions to the answer that he was writing in the Yoga Sutra. He wasn't actually writing them himself. The Yoga Sutras were actually written, I think, quite a few hundred years later. I think, I might be wrong. But he was chanting them, and people were memorizing them. So if I go to the Bhashya, to the original commentary, and before I go to the Shloka 30, so the Shloka 30 is going to describe what are these obstacles. He is literally writing, he says, what else happened? So he said, we did say, so we're chanting Om, and as we chant Om, we surrender into Ishvara. So he said, what else happens? That's the question of the Bhashya. And he says that from that comes realization of the individual self, and the obstacles are resolved. So what happens when we chant Om? The realization of the true self, the individual self, which is the ultimate self, comes, and then obstacles are removed. And then he goes to say, well, what are these obstacles which disturb the mind? What are they called, and how many are these? So that's the question. It's not actually written in the Yoga Sutra. So going back to the Yoga Sutra to read the answer. And the answer is disease, dullness, doubt, carelessness, laziness, sensuality, false perception, failure to reach firm ground, and slipping from the ground again. These distractions of the mind stuff are the obstacles. So here Patanjali describes 9 obstacles, and he's named each one of them, and he said that these obstacles will distract it's called mind stuff. So that's kind of Satchidananda's word, mind stuff. In Sanskrit it's known as chitta, which some will say consciousness rather than mind stuff, because some people will say that mind stuff is maybe your brain. It's not your brain, it's the consciousness which is beyond the kind of the physical brain. These distractions will affect the consciousness and will obstruct you from gaining the state of samadhi through the chanting of Om, that will get you to samadhi by contemplating Ishvara Pranidhana. So 9 obstacles. So we start with those, because that's quite good. Okay, so I'll describe the obstacles themselves, I'll read each one of them, and just give a few kind of simple understanding of what these things are. So first one is illness. And I think, everybody who's been in a situation, and maybe some of you are, where your health is not 100%, you know that when your health is not 100%, you don't really have enough maybe time or energy or space in your life to focus on practice. Maybe. Typically. So let's just say you are, in hospital, or you are lying in bed and quite ill, and you are not able to practice because you are kind of slipping in and out of maybe of consciousness. You fall asleep, you're waking up, you eat something, you fall back asleep. You are too ill to practice, to do anything. So obviously then you can't practice. Illness doesn't have to be that serious. You can be not so ill, but still it will take a lot of your energy. So illness or disease, whether it's physical or mental, mental disease, obviously the same thing. It is difficult to do yoga if you are sick. It's important, obviously, in that case, to lead a healthy life that will prevent illness. So first thing, illness is the first obstacle. Second one is lack of interest or apathy. So Satchidananda, in his translation, he calls it dullness. What does that mean? It's you are kind of disinclined towards performing your duty, towards performing your practice. You just can't be bothered, really. You kind of almost lost faith. And that is quite important, because if you let's say you are well, you have your ability to practice, but you just lost interest. Maybe for a while you were practicing, didn't see any results, or all of a sudden the teachings you were following, you realize that the person teaching them is not who you thought that person was, and you lost heart and you lost faith. you stop practicing. So that's kind of quite simple. Sadly, happens quite a lot. Especially, I suppose, nowadays when we kind of learn the truth about some of the great kind of teachers in the world who were supposedly, kind of holier than thou, and then they actually became quite obviously not holy at all, and perhaps not very nice people. And then you think, well, if that person was preaching these things and didn't really work for them, why would it work for me? So people lose interest and lose faith and lose heart, and therefore stop practicing. So that's second obstacle. Third obstacle is doubting one's capacity of the results of yoga. So you're not doubting that yoga works, you're doubting that you can actually get there. For example, the first chapter of the Yoga Sutra, the Samadhi part, you think, well, I'm not able to reach Samadhi. I'm not good enough for that. Yes, that sounds like a great thing, but you know what? I can't barely sit for 2 minutes in meditation without my mind going all over the place. How can I even get there? So doubting yourself. Which obviously, once you doubt yourself, you lose faith in yourself, you lose heart, you stop practicing. So again, very, very sad, but very true. It's a fact. The next one is carelessness. Pramada, it's called in Sanskrit. You just, you lose that ability to persist. You're not as kind of determined in your path to the point where you feel like I'm not going to do it. Because we said that yoga is both, it's a science, it's an art. And you need to approach it with skill, with care, with respect, with devotion. And if you don't approach it with that, your practice is going to be on, off, and then just off. So that ability to be persistent comes with the care that you have for yourself and for your practice. And when you lack that care, you just stop practicing. So it's not like you don't believe in it. It's not like you don't believe in yourself, but you just are not persistent enough to maintain that. Another one which comes next is it's called alasya in Sanskrit, which is kind of laziness. Some describe it as sloth, which I suppose most of us, maybe the word sloth is a bit kind of harsh, but laziness we can all relate to, I'm sure. You know the practice is good for you. Yes, I can do it, and you know what? I got the motivation, but it's like 5 o'clock in the morning. The alarm goes on, and think, you know what? Not today. I can't do it today. Okay, I know that it's good for me. I'm just not going to do it. Or maybe you're already doing that. Maybe you start your practice and then you just go, I'm not going to carry on. I had enough. It's enough for me. That's it. I'm going. So there's an aspect of laziness. You're not a bad person, but you kind of lost your vigor, your ability to maintain through it. So, whether you started and then stopped, or whether you didn't even start, whether maybe you didn't even get out of bed. That's the sloth or the laziness, which we call alasya. And the next one, so Patanjali has a word for it. It's called, let me just get the word. That's it. Avirati, which Satchidananda calls it sensuality. So I've come across a few different translation when they translated avirati into, let me find here, into overindulgent. So we have the concept in the Yoga Sutra of vairagyam, and vairagya means letting go or detachment from anything. This is kind of the opposite of detachment. This is not vairagyam, it's avi. So it's the opposite of vairagyam, as in, instead of being detached, you are really deeply attached. So it could be to sensual things, which we can say what's sensual. Maybe food can be sensual. Obviously, maybe the sexual sensuality. It can be maybe towards drinking, or towards maybe recreational drugs, or just towards just staying in bed because that feels quite good for your senses. Okay, so sensuality, not necessarily kind of sex, just senses. So everything that attaches you through the working of your senses, which I'm sure we can all relate to because we are pretty much quite controlled by our senses. So that's the number 6 obstacle. And the next one, following that, false perception very common thing, false perception. So the development of false notion about the practice of yoga and its overcome can not only lead one off the path of yoga, but also create harm and disappointment. What does that mean? The false notion about the practice of yoga and its overcome. So you feel like, yes, I started doing yoga, but done it for a whole year, but still haven't seen much results. So it's not going to work for me. It's obviously not for me. Or I've done it maybe 2 years or maybe 10 years. I'm still really not there yet. So maybe it's not for me. So you have a false vision of the end goal of yoga, and you don't understand that can take quite a long time. So that's quite a big one. Because having faith is quite important. In fact, Patanjali, in a different part, he talks about the 3 keys for maintaining a yoga practice or maintain yourself on the spiritual path. And the first one he calls Shraddha, which is faith. So without that faith in yourself, in the tools, as in the practice of yoga, and in the goal of where you're going to go, and in the teachings of those who kind of guide you, whether it's physical teaching or just the books, you will not get it. You're not going to get there. So Shraddha is essential, and the lack of Shraddha, the lack of faith, can lead towards this false vision. You kind of lost your vision, and therefore you will not practice. So that's number 7. Number 8 is non-attainment of the next yogic stage or accomplishment. And again, that's quite common, because most of us in the West, possibly most of us here on this chat or part of this tribe, getting into yoga, most of us, through the practice of asana. We start yoga with some physical postures, and we feel like, okay, we kind of done physical postures for a while now, but what else is there? Surely there's more that kind of leads ahead, but we're not there yet. So maybe we kind of dabbled with a bit of meditation or a bit of pranayama, but we're not really getting there. Or maybe even in the asana itself, because asana is not just physical. Obviously, as you know, asana is not exercise. The tool of asana itself is a spiritual path. So doing yoga asana is not just for your body, it's actually your spiritual practice. But you feel like, I'm stuck in my asana practice. I've been doing these things for quite a long time. My body's still stiff. I wake up and my body's still sore, and it takes forever to kind of warm up, and this is not working. So you feel like I'm not able to move to the next phase because I'm stuck in this phase that I am now, and therefore you feel like, I'm just going to leave it. It's an obstacle for you to move forwards. And the last one, number 9, is the instability or the inability to maintain the stage that you're already on. So not only that you're not able to move forwards, like in obstacle 8, you are in obstacle 9 and you can't even maintain what you already got. So the inability to maintain the ground that you already covered. So for example, let's say you kind of feel like you've done some good work in your asana, and then the next day you just can't do it. What's going on? I lost it. Or you've done some good work with pranayama, the next day you can't do pranayama. And then you just give up. Okay, so these are the 9 obstacles. So illness, lack of interest, doubting one's capacity, carelessness, laziness, deep attachment, false vision, non-attainment of the next stage, or not ability to maintain the stage that you are on. These are the 9 obstacles according to Patanjali. And he said that with these 9 obstacles, they will distract the chitta, the mind stuff, the consciousness, from gaining the state of being one with Ishvara, maybe through the practice of Om, and being one with Ishvara as in surrendering to Ishvara, which means samadhi. So basically you're not able to reach the ultimate goal, which is samadhi, because of these 9 obstacles, whether it's for all of them or just even one of them. So obviously not very nice. So Shloka 31 says accompaniment to the mental distractions include. So not only you have 9 mental distractions, there's extra, there's 4 more. You have distress, despair, trembling of the body, and disturbed breathing. So not only these 9 obstacles will stop you from gaining that state that you would like to achieve of samadhi, but they also give you more harmful things. The Bhashya itself slightly describes them differently. It's calling them sorrow, dejection, restlessness of the body, inhalation and exhalation arising from previous distractions. So sorrow, which we call dukkha, is the first one. Quite interestingly, I want to read from here as well. Sorrow is of three kinds. We have sorrow arising from within oneself. We have sorrow inflicted by some other creature, as in person or animal. And then we have sorrow through natural calamities. So three types of dukkha: from yourself, from other beings, or from kind of elemental forces. And I'm saying that because if you are, and probably you are familiar with the practice of chanting Om Shanti Shanti Shanti, or Shantihi. Why do we chant Shanti, which means peace, 3 times? It's each one for these sorrows. So the first Shanti is for the sorrow within oneself. I'm asking peace for the sorrow within myself. The second Shanti is for the sorrows from other beings, other creatures. And the third Shanti, the third piece, I'm requesting peace from kind of natural forces. So 3 times Shanti because of 3 types of sorrow. So sorrow arises as well, dukkha, and then depression or pain caused by non-fulfillment of desires, which we also can call dejection. And then we have the shivering of the body parts, which we call restlessness of the body. So you can say that's the nervous system, because what's causing all this nervousness is your nervous system. And then obstruction of the or disturbance of the breath, which is swasha prashwasha. So the breath itself is not stable. So 9 obstacles leading to 4 states of misery. Not very nice. Okay, not very nice. So it's not that Patanjali is trying to kind of put a spanner in the works and kind of stopping you from wanting to move forwards. He's just pointing out human states. We all are human beings, and whether we have all of these 9 disturbances, or whether we have 1 of them or 2 of them, we all have some of them. So what do we do, more importantly? So the first thing to recognize is, yes, sorrow is there, disturbances are there, obstructions, disturbances, obstacles, call them what you want. They stop you from getting out of bed and doing your practice. Basically, they stop you from gaining the state that you want to go to, which is you evolving yourself into the true self, as in to become what you know you can be, as in to embody your spiritual self, which we will call samadhi. So that said, now good news coming. First of all, we recognize, yes, there are these obstacles, and these are the obstacles. So if you can align yourself with yourself and kind of hand on heart says, start one, that one, that one, that one. Now you can kind of ask Patanjali, okay, now what do I do? So the good news is Patanjali is saying that you can do lots of things, but he's very, very clever, and he's saying that in a one sentence, in one shloka, he explains how to overcome them. And he's saying that the practice of concentration on single subject, which we call eka-tattva, is the best way to prevent the obstacles and their accompaniment. Okay, so he's not saying, well, you know, you need to maybe get a life coach and maybe move to a different country, maybe change the way you're eating, or maybe change the position of the bed in your room, or, you know, he's just saying focus on one thing, one simple thing, eka-tattva. Concentrating on one thing will allow you to move away from these obstacles and their accompaniment. So the accompaniment, the 4 states of mind, and the 9 obstacles that kind of get you there. So I'll read it again because that's quite important. When I read that first time, I thought, good, there is some good news. There is a way forwards. The practice of concentration on a single subject is the best way to prevent the obstacles and their accompaniment. And don't forget, Patanjali was not just someone who kind of woke up in the morning and thought, oh, I know, I'm going to write a book, I'm going to start a podcast. I think I got a few ideas. Let's just throw them out and see what people say. He wrote these things based on his own experience and based on the experience of people around him during this time who were dedicating every second of their life to spirituality, and they were basing the practices on people who came before them who were dedicating every second of their life to spiritual practices. So he's not just chatting. He talks about these things from his own personal experience and the experience of possibly thousands of other people who have been in the same situation and went forward, as in they managed to overcome these things. These things are real help. They're not just kind of, suggestions. They are real. Do it, it does work. So one more time, the practice of concentration on a single subject is the best way to prevent the obstacles and their accompaniment. And now I'm going to read a few more things here. So he starts to explore it a bit more. And I did say it before, I'll say it again here in the context of this conversation, that Patanjali, in the way that he's presenting the Yoga Sutras, he's always given the highest practice first, and then he kind of elaborates a bit more, which means that you don't need to read everything if you already got it from the first word. So the first sentence says, basically focus on one thing. And if you are able to focus on one thing, that's enough. You don't need to read further. But if you slightly wavering with your ability to focus on one thing, it's fine. He's giving you more options. So what is he saying? A very important shloka, book 133, by cultivating attitude of friendliness towards the happy, compassion towards the unhappy, delight in the virtuous, and disregard towards the wicked, the chitta, the mind stuff, the consciousness, retains its undisturbed calmness. So we want to be undisturbed, we want to be calm. How do we do that? We are not, someone, a yogi who kind of sits in a cave or lives in a jungle or somewhere in the mountain. We live with people, whether in a household or in a neighborhood or at work. We come across people. How do we maintain a really stable mind when people around us, to some extent, piss us off? They disturb our mind. They makes us maybe anxious. They make us angry. They make us irritated. What do we do? There's lots to do. So the first thing is cultivating, and the word cultivating here is important. He's not saying be 100% of that. Work on it. He's saying cultivate it. It takes time. Cultivate an attitude of friendliness towards the happy. Just think of that. You see someone very, very happy. Can you be happy for them? Rather than think, well, why they're happy and I'm miserable? Because we tend to do that. Someone just, just walking down the street, a kind of big smile on their face, they're walking really fine, you're thinking, wow, how come they be so happy? How comes I'm miserable? I really don't like that. That's very common. I'm not saying it's you, maybe you are not like that, but it's very common, and maybe occasionally you do that. So he's saying, try, as in cultivate an attitude of friendliness. If you see someone happy, smile at them. They're happy. That's great for them. Be friendly towards them. It's not easy, but cultivate, work on that. And then he's saying compassion towards the unhappy. If you see someone unhappy, rather than thinking like, well, he's unhappy, but I'm doing well, good for me, sad for them, cultivate compassion. And don't forget that compassion is not pity. We're not trying to pity them, oh, poor you, so sorry for you, quite good about myself. Compassion is trying to imagine yourself as that person. How would you feel if you were in that situation? That's compassion. So trying to kind of step into their shoes. That's what he's saying. If you go and step into their shoe of a person which is unhappy, you will develop compassion. And when you develop compassion, your mind stays steady. The next one is delight in the virtuous. So if someone is virtuous, doing some great things, delight in their virtuousness. They don't be envious and don't think like, oh, it's a shame that I can't do these things. Just be amazed that they can do these things. If you know people who are, amazing, And it could be, your neighbor down the road, the dustman, or I don't know, the Dalai Lama or Mother Teresa or anyone like that who's doing really amazing stuff. Just be grateful that these people are out there and use them as inspiration rather than look at them and think, well, I'm not as good, I can't compare myself to them, so I feel bad about myself, because that brings your mind to a state of unbalancedness. So be delightful in their virtuousness, and that will calm your mind, stable your mind, because that's what we're doing. Last one, perhaps the hardest one, disregard towards the wicked. When we kind of recognize wickedness, we tend to get quite emotionally triggered. So he's not saying don't do anything about it. If someone is wicked, doing bad things, yes, maybe it should be your dharma to do something about that, but not in the not to the place where it will take you away from your center. So maintain your center, disregard their action, not to the point of I don't care, I'm not going to let that affect me, but I'm still going to do something about that. Okay, just like in the Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna is encouraging Arjuna to go and basically fight the evil, fight the injustice, fight the adharma. We need to do something, but don't let that affect your steadiness. So maintain a calm, stable, balanced state, and from that state you can go and do something. Okay, so these are practical things that Patanjali says that will help you to maintain that steady mind. And we know that steady mind will allow you to overcome the obstacles. That's what Patanjali is promising us, because focusing on one thing that will stabilize your mind is his promise to allow you to overcome the obstacles and the accompanying states of mind, the 4 states of mind. He's given a few more, so I'm just going to read through them quickly. All that calm, as in that state of mind which is stable, is retained by the controlled exhalation or retention of the breath. And as you possibly know, when you are stressed, your breath is becoming stress. It becomes a bit erratic, maybe it becomes very shallow, maybe you breathe through the mouth. So he's saying, control your exhalation. Okay, it's not really pranayama, and I know Satchidananda here talks about the fact that this is the first instructions for pranayama. Well, maybe. I don't see it exactly as pranayama here. I see it as more control of the breath itself. This is not prana. This is just breath going in, going out. When the exhalation is erratic, you're losing lots of carbon dioxide. When your carbon dioxide level drops down, your circulation decreases, you have less blood going to your brain, and therefore you can't make good decisions. So if you control the exhalation, as in extend your exhalation, you control it to the point where you are able to increase your levels of CO2 inside your body. That will improve the circulation inside your body. That will improve the circulation up to your brain, which will allow you to make good decisions, and you stay calm. So you see, I'm sure you are familiar, that when someone gets like a panic attack, you breathe into like a bag, a paper bag, because that helps them to get more CO2 inside their body, to increase the levels of CO2. That brings calmness. So the exhalation, lengthening of the exhalation, that will control your blood levels, that will control your also the stress hormone, cortisol, adrenaline, that you become calm. And when you are calm, that's what we want. We want to be stayed, focused on one thing. So when you are calm, you can focus on one thing. When the breath is disturbed, you cannot focus on one thing. So another good way that Patanjali is saying, because he's very practical. It's not about you going to the cave again and trying to hide from the world. He's given you, first of all, 4 things you can do with people. Yeah, you can either cultivate happiness, you can cultivate compassion, you can cultivate delight, you can cultivate indifference when you come into contact with certain people. You can also cultivate the breath, which is easy because it's always within you. Concentration on subtle sense perception can cause steadiness of mind. Subtle sense perception. So the next one and the next 2 actually, or by concentrating on the supreme, ever blissful light within, maybe we can leave it into some other time because they are a lot more subtle. Where is that light within? Can't see it. Is it there? Yes, it is there, but maybe they're a bit more subtle. Also that supreme perception. What is the concentration or subtle sense perception, that supreme steadiness? You can say that's more kind of drop into the what we call nowadays the witness. So rather than being in the monkey mind that we're familiar with, dropping back and witnessing the monkey mind. So you're witnessing, and that witness is not affected by it. He's saying drop deeper, go into the deep mind, or focus on that supreme light within you. Or by concentrating on the great soul's mind, which is totally freed from attachment to sense objects. What is the great soul's mind? The way I see it is, again, connecting to your inner Ishvara. So the ability to recognize that you are this supreme. So again, it's that kind of witness, but you're going even deeper than that. Because the witness is still on the level of the mind. We call the witness the buddhi, the awakened mind. But now we're going beyond the mind, your spirit. Remember, you are a spirit, and a spirit which is unblemished, unlimited, which is beyond all limitations, and therefore doesn't need to be disturbed by anything. Now another one here, or by concentrating on an experience you had during dream or deep sleep, which again I'll just leave it at that, I'm not going to go into that, or, and the last one is quite good, or by meditating on anything one chooses that is elevating. That is good news. If all the other things before that were a bit like obscure, I'm not really sure how to get to my witness, have no idea how to find my inner light, how to connect to my greater soul, the supreme soul. I come in contact with people and they really press my buttons. I really can't cultivate that. He's saying concentrate on anything which is elevating. Anything. So again, he's very, very practical. He's saying, if you struggle with this, if you struggle with that, just find anything. Anything, literally anything. But focus on it. Because ultimately, to overcome the obstacles, you need to focus on one thing. Eka Tattva. Eka is one, Tattva is a thing, you can say. It's more than a thing, but you call it a thing. Eka Tattva. Focus on one thing, but focus on it. And when you focus on it, you are focused, you are in balance, and therefore your mind comes to balance, which means you can either focus on Om or focus on Ishvara or surrender to Ishvara, and then you're in a state of Samadhi, which leads you to the place of yoga. That's how you overcome the obstacles. Okay, so that was the conversation about the obstacles. So I hope you found this informative, and I really hope that you kind of enjoyed it and you find that it's quite relate to your own journey, to your own problems, to your own struggles. And maybe there were some ways, there's some information that will help you to kind of move forwards. So again, if you enjoyed it, please give the video a like, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and to share this with other people. More importantly, if you are finding these things particularly interested, why don't you send me a message down, write some comments, or send me an email so we can carry on this conversation, because I would really like to know how it works for you. Thank you very much. I'm wishing you a fantastic day. Namaste.